Okay, we are live right now. We are doing an interview with Roslyn Meluish.
It's pronounced Mellish.
Mellish.
Yeah, they use sneaky.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
Roslyn Mellish. Roslyn is a Californian. Like many Californians, they travel abroad, but they never lose their sense of home. She'll be returning back soon. She never lost her California values. She's also watched the Cal Exit podcast recently by Awfully Nice Production Company, and she has a couple thoughts about that. We're going to get right to that in just a second, let you know who Rosalind is, her story, and what she has to say about California. But first, check this out, and we will be right back with a fascinating interview that'll knock your socks off. So, who is Rosalind and why is she here today? Well, let's take a look. We have her permission to show a little bit about her background. If we say anything wrong, please correct us. Rosalind Meluish is a fashion is my passion. She is a creative director, stylist, model, designer.
Sorry, it's pronounced Mellish.
No, I'm just going to go with Rosalind.
My dog corrected you.
Thank you. Rosalind, and I am not qualified to pronounce last names today.
No, it confuses everybody because it's the stupid U. I don't know. The British are whack.
It's just Monday, so it's my fault. I own it. Fashion is my passion. She's creative director, stylist, model, designer, sustainability, medium writer. Are you a mom?
Dog mom.
Dog mom.
Dog emoji. No, I don't have any kids.
Yeah. And there's some of her, she does a lot of fashion. She seems to be well-traveled. This is the LinkedIn page, creative director, designer, model, stylist, visual merchandiser. You talked about Utah a little bit there, some of her contacts. And this is Rosalind's page where you can find out more about her. Here's her information.
Yeah, I just changed the location to where I am now. That's just like where I'm located. So 2 weeks ago, it was New York City.
She was in New York.
Yeah.
And now she's coming back to California. And she was originally from California. College graduate from LIM College with a bachelor's degree in fashion visual studies obtained in 2022. Variety of skills in fashion design, fashion styling, fashion creative direction, and fashion modeling. You can check her out more there. Now, recently, she watched The Last Resort. The new podcast takes a deep dive into Cal Exit, produced by Warner Brothers Music. Interval presents, in addition, with Awfully Nice Production Company. So that is who she is and the big story. Did I, besides your last name, which I butchered a couple times?
No, everybody does. I don't think
that's on me. That's on me. No excuses.
No, I'm glad you got my first name right. A lot of people will say Roslyn or Rosalind. So,
there was a show called Frasier. You ever heard of the show Frasier? There was a TV show called Frasier about two psychologists, and there was a woman character on there named Rosalind. That's how I knew to pronounce her name.
With a Z?
With a Z.
Oh, okay. I know that in the Shakespeare play, Romeo and Juliet, the ex-lover was Rosalind. So a lot of people think of it that way.
Yeah, and yours is
just saw the movie, the remake. It was good.
Rosalind. Her name's spelled correctly at the bottom of the page. That's with a hard Z, not an S. Shakespearean spelling. California girl.
Not a lot of people have that spelling. My mom did it on purpose to make it unique.
Oh, okay.
Because your name's Nancy. She's like, I want my daughter's name to be less common.
Okay, there you go. So, all right. Well, I wish I could say that your mom designed your last name. Then I'd have an excuse for having messed it up a few times. But
nope.
Okay. Well,
just British and got translated to America, and it's just like that.
Interesting. You're part Italian, maybe?
Yeah. So I have Italian on my dad's side, uh, mainly British. My dad passed away when I was a child.
Sorry to
Um,
hear that.
it's okay. Well, it's not okay, but I'm okay. He committed suicide when I was like 8 years old. A big part of the reason why I believe in this movement is because of my personal traumas, and a lot of it seems to be normalized, like sickeningly normalized. Like for example,
Well said.
one example is, well, it ties into personal experiences mostly, and what I see from my friends and family and social medias and life. Uh, One small example is my father. This is really tough to say and hear, but my father, when he was like going into a manic state, he eventually stopped taking his pills.
Mm,
He was like going on and off medication. He was seeing the doctor, then he wasn't seeing the doctor, then he was seeing the doctor, then he wasn't. And you know what? I think part of the reason why is because mental health is worse for men than women, and this is statistically true. Because he killed himself in 2007, and it was even worse back then for sure. But because he had a family and he had a full-time career, so it was stigmatized to be like, oh, you don't have mental health problems, that's only for women and children. You know what I mean? Like, you got to take care of your family, you have to go to work, and nobody cares about that shit. You know what I mean? So
I do. I do.
that should not be normal. That's not normal. That's not right. So he just thought, oh, I'm a macho man, I need to suck it up. Also, on top of that, he hunted, which is fine, but he had psychological severe depression and anxiety. People with psychological depression and anxiety shouldn't be able to have guns. He was never psychologically tested. Why is that normal? It's not right. He should just stick with the crossbow or spear, which he also had. Why does he have to have all these guns in the first place? Especially if he's so mentally disabled.
In California, we're willing to take away guns and do a lot of gun regulations, but in America, they don't like that. In fact,
Yeah.
they refer to themselves as free states, and California is a not free state. I'm sure you've heard this term in Utah, where they refer to California as a not free state and Utah as a
Yeah, I
free
know.
state. What they mean is we can have as many guns as they want.
They
So you're
even
talking
say
about,
New York too. Hmm.
yeah, well, you're talking about a different set of values. So you're going, why isn't it like this? And that makes sense for us in here in California.
Hmm.
But California is part of America, and
Yeah, that
Americans love
was
their
in
guns.
California. That was in
What?
California. I was saying
Okay,
that was in California when that
yeah,
happened.
yeah.
Mhm.
But we would have even more strict gun laws in California if we could get away with it. In fact, some of our recent gun laws were struck down by the federal courts. So we have tried to have more strict gun laws here, and the federal government said, no, you don't get to have that for yourself, California. So, and it will always be that way as long as we're part of America. We don't have the ability to make our own laws. Any law we make can be struck down by the federal courts if, a majority of Americans just don't like what we're trying to do. That's
Well,
just the way it is.
I also don't like that everybody is so fixated on this document from 1776 that's not relevant to today. It's like archaic. Why does the Second Amendment right and all of these, why is this constitution, archaic constitution, so important? It makes no sense.
One of the things we often bring up here is so every state gets two senators, right? And there's the electoral college, which gives outside votes to these small states. So there's like 35, 40 small states that have a lot more representation than they should. And so, like Donald Trump was not popularly elected. George W. Bush was not popularly elected. The Supreme Court is making decisions that are not popular by Americans. Why is this? Because the minority of the population, represented by a majority of states, can control everything, and that's baked into the Constitution.
The abortion laws don't have a popular support. I mean, the abortion bans that just happened, and most of the states, people are against the abortion ban.
Yeah,
it's just all backwards.
Right. So why do we have a Supreme Court that passes a law that most Americans don't support?
I also think that age limits need to be more enforced, because most of those people in the Supreme Court are elderly, and they have all these views from the 2 generations back, and they're not even trying to comply with like you and I's and everybody else's views.
True. And that's, because there's 35 states and Kentucky and Utah and Wyoming and Minnesota and Louisiana and Alabama, and there's more of them than there is California and New York states. So,
I do know that in Utah they reversed the abortion ban, so at least there's that. I mean, I feel better staying here for about 1.5 years with that, but still they're a little more, I mean, they're more progressive than the South, but they're not as progressive as even Nevada or California, for sure. But it's more like a mix here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's because a lot of Californians moved here. So yeah, it is. There a lot of people are from California.
Yeah, that would make sense. Californians moved to other states and then changed their laws.
Mm-hmm.
Are Californians treated well in Utah? Is there any resentment about so many Californians moving there?
Honestly, hardly any resentment.
Okay.
No, maybe just a tiny bit from like a small percentage of people that are super far right wing. They're like, get out of our state. But I don't see it as apparent as like, well, I haven't lived in the South, but I'm sure it's not as apparent as the South. It's really not that bad.
Okay.
But I can't stay here mainly because I want to live in California again. And also for the fashion career is not very apparent here. This is very specific. Actually, it's huge for film industry and about every other art but fashion. And medical. It's really big for mental and physical health care. It used to be one of the worst states for mental. Now it's flipping. Also, I think that's because more Californians moved here. Real estate's huge, but it's like I can't stay here for the fashion industry. It's just very small. So that's why I need to go back to Cali. I also prefer Cali. So.
Right on. So what did you watched the podcast on Cal Exit? That's how this conversation got started, was you saw the podcast and you go, wow,
Yes.
I want to talk about that. What was it that grabbed you? Let's do this gently. Like, what were the top 2 scenes that just keep rolling across your head where you're like, oh, I remember I was just like, oh, they said this. What grabbed you? What do you remember? What were your visceral memories? What seemed to motivate you the most out of the podcast?
Yeah, so what grabbed me the most was the fact that like we were just talking about, our popular vote is not like voted yes. I mean, I'm not a politician, so excuse me, but our popular vote is not totally being ignored, and then there's just one or a few politicians that vote the opposite of what the people want, which is that's not democracy. Like, everybody says this is such a pro-democracy country. Get out and vote. It's so discouraging to vote because of this. And also this ties in, a lot of it ties into my personal experiences. For example, I moved to New York City I got the New York State ID. I did everything right at the DMV. And because I wanted to vote, I mean, you don't really drive over there. There's no point. You know what I mean? But I had the ID to vote and to also have healthcare, which I did. And I asked the DMV employee, I'm like, okay, I did everything. Can I ensure with you, is my ballot going to be mailed to me? He's like, oh yeah, totally. You don't have to do anything at all. And then the manager he even checked with the manager. The manager said yes. And sure enough, the local election comes by. I don't get a ballot at all. I did everything right. I was exhausted. I turned in all of my documents, uh, everything required, double, triple checked everything, had everything in hard copy. And I have excuse my language, I have the fucking ID and my exact address. Nothing. Nothing. It's ridiculous.
I agree. I agree. Um, yeah. So you can't necessarily be sure about your access to democracy, and you're also worried about uh, how much votes matter in America anymore. I totally get it. What were some of the other things that struck you or angered you or aggravated you or motivated you? You sent me that email. I could tell it was like a kind of a spot of inspiration. I get the impression like you're like, oh, so
Yeah,
what grabbed you? What was like, oh, I have got
honestly,
to send this email right now. Get to the bottom of this. What happened?
honestly, Marcus, like everything.
But you got to break it down. They don't know that. They don't know
Yeah,
that,
you're right.
Rosalind. You got to break it down. Like I know the documentary. I know what you mean. This is for the people who haven't seen it to go. Yeah, I'm missing
The
out.
fact that Trump got elected, but Hillary won. But Hillary was the popular vote. I don't like either of them. But that's not right. Um, I also don't like. I hate the two-party system. I really don't like it, where it's like it's one way or the other and nothing in between at all. That's not democracy either. Other countries like Europe, like I have friends in Europe. I have friends in Nigeria. I have friends from Canada. I have friends all over the world because I traveled, and they tell me it's not like that there. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, this is less of a democracy than basically the rest
Uh,
of the world.
I'm impressed because we talk about that all the time. It's called the American winner take all style of democracy. That's what other countries call it, and they view it as insane.
It is insane.
Insane. And that's
Yeah,
American. Yeah. Modern countries go, wow, the way you guys do things is all sorts of jacked up.
it is. And also, another example is I I worked like my last college internship was like a kind of an national student internship, people from all over the world. I really became close friends with this one girl from France, working for a doing an internship for a business partner. And I was talking about like how their voting system works and then how ours works. And I told her about like electoral colleges. She's like, does your popular vote really go far? I'm like, well, if the Senate votes for it, they're like, what? She's like, what? What the hell? She's like, we don't even have that. It's just based off of what the people vote. So that aggravates me even more that our own government doesn't even bother to look at what other countries do. A lot of Americans don't even bother to look at what they're doing right and what we're doing wrong. They just act like, oh, it's fine. It's not.
That's another thing we routinely say here. American culture is not concerned about the outside world. There's no encouragement. The media doesn't do anything about it. Whereas if you come to California,
Yeah.
40% of us are immigrants.
Yeah, that's true.
we are crawling with people from other countries and walks of life, or people who just travel to go meet their family for 2 weeks and come back. I mean, if you don't want to know what the foreign world is like, don't come to California,
Yeah,
because it's,
exactly.
it's all over the place. You can't get a. I haven't traveled that much, but my friends, you can't go outside without running into people who aren't from another country or haven't traveled recently, and that's who we are. But you can look at Americans, and the other culture is completely opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we need to know about anything going on out there? Who are these weirdos? They don't have anything to teach us. And in
Yeah, they do.
California, right? Yeah, exactly. Right?
I also am a strong believer it's good to learn something from everybody in your life, even if you don't particularly like them. Like you just grab information from different sources. What was my favorite country to visit? Oh, that's so tough.
Putting you on the spot.
That's really tough. I'd have to say that is between Japan and what country in Europe? That's hard. There's so
Paris,
no,
London,
not Paris, not London. Uh,
Liechtenstein,
maybe like
Frankfurt.
Germany. Germany, yeah, I like the southern area of Germany and Italy. Italy's beautiful. No, like honestly, every European country is cool. I don't have a particular favorite. That's so hard.
And that's another thing. A lot of people in America don't travel, but Californians typically do.
Yeah,
Californians have a 300% increase over the average American of owning a visa and traveling. I looked
yeah.
up
My mother. Well, when I grew, when I grew old enough to remember, because it's kind of my mom figured it's pointless to take my kid overseas when she's 5 or like 10. But as soon as I turned 13, she took me all over Europe. I have an aunt in Japan, Tokyo, Japan. We visited her. She took us to Kyoto and Hakone. It was beautiful, beautiful country. And let me tell you, almost every single country I visited, I felt safer than our own country. What does that tell you? Like, I felt safer and more welcomed. And almost every American who's traveled feels the same.
But if Americans aren't concerned about what goes on in the foreign world, then they'll never be bothered to come to that conclusion that, wow, parts of the foreign world are safer than here. My mom travels a lot. She goes to Mexico. I don't really like that because the cartels, but she does point out something whenever I bring up to her. And she goes, if you go to Mexico, maybe they do have the cartels, but they don't have school shootings. They don't have school shootings. They
That's
don't,
true.
they don't worry about that.
I mean, it's mainly just like if you're involved in the drug trade, then you're going to be a
Yeah.
target. If you stay away from it, you're fine.
Yeah. So that was something that, and you don't hear about that in American news. All we ever hear about is Mexico's bad, 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 bad. Everything's bad. And certainly there are problems there, as I was trying to tell her. But we never hear the story about, okay, but America, when you're looking down at these other countries, are there areas where they can look down on you? For example,
Yeah.
every parent in America is now worried about their kid getting shot. That is not a concern for parents in Mexico.
It's true. That's the truth.
I see where they're selling bulletproof backpacks now. That's a popular gift this season for children in America.
That's so sad.
They don't
That's
have that in Europe, right? They don't have that
oh,
in
no.
Japan. This isn't a problem in South Korea. This isn't
They have
something they deal with in
stricter guns.
Germany. Yeah.
That's why.
Why? What is it about American culture where we just love guns and shooting things, and way more than what it seems the rest of the modern world does?
I think it's so violent. You know what it is? Everybody's fixated on the Second Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Second Amendment. Well, what does that matter when people are dying or hurting, like being shot and injured or killed? My dad blew his brains out. This really sticks to me because I ever since my dad killed himself right after, my mom's like, okay, we're getting rid of all the guns, all of them. I never want to see them again. We don't want to be around guns. We don't want to be involved with them. Uh, we only want to go to the police when it's an absolute emergency because the guns they carry scare us or we're traumatized. It's traumatizing.
My grandfather also took his life with a gun.
I'm sorry about that.
So I have a little, it's not anything near what you've gone through, but I have some, but I think that says something. Here's the two of us we've never met, and both of us have relatives who ended their own lives with guns. I mean, is that, maybe that's the story of America.
It's an example.
Yeah. And
our mental health is worse than most other countries too.
Let's talk about living standards. One of the things I saw when Barack Obama was president, and people said, oh, he's the good president, he's smart. Little known story that didn't make a lot of get a lot of attention at the time was the United Nations sent a special investigator to America during the last 2 years of Obama's presidency. And the Obama administration initially invited this person in and said it's fine, until the UN, it was called a special rapporteur, French word, issued their findings. And then the Obama administration would have nothing to do with them and wouldn't acknowledge that they ever talked to them. Because that UN investigation found that most of America resembled third world living standards. And the Obama administration didn't want to be known as being part of that. So they kind of buried the report, made sure nobody really saw it. But before Trump, before Biden, when supposedly we had a good president, the UN came here and said, you guys are not in any position to be looking down on Latin America or Africa or Russia or China. You have places where people don't have running water without poison, right? You have multiple places in the South. There's a place called Flint, Michigan. You can't even guarantee good water to your people, and you want to say they're backwards and you guys got it right. And this was the United Nations. So,
you know what reminds me about that? When I lived in New York City, right? And the water has always been so pure and good there. It surprises some people, but I think it's from Saratoga Springs or somewhere upstate. But recently they're handing out the polio vaccine because there's polio in the New York City water. And people are getting sick from the water now. It was purified, but now has some kind of toxin in it. I always used a Brita though, but that's an example. I was actually planning on getting the polio vaccine, but I moved. So.
Yeah, I got to be careful getting into talk about that.
That's okay.
I will show this, why the UN is investigating extreme poverty in America, the world's richest nation. Let me show you that real quick, just to back up what we're talking about here. So here's The Guardian, a non-American newspaper, because they wouldn't talk about it in the US. So why is the UN investigating extreme poverty in America, the world's richest nation? Isn't that weird? Turns out the United Nations monitors extreme poverty and human rights around the world. And they've been looking at America because America doesn't take care of its people, from homelessness in California to racial discrimination in the Deep South to cumulative neglect in Puerto Rico to the decline of industrial jobs in West Virginia. 41 million Americans officially in poverty. One of the aim of the UN special reporter on extreme Phil Alston, a feisty Australian New York law professor. So the U.S. is no stranger to Alston's withering tongue, having come under heavy criticism, etc. So that's something we won't talk about in America, how international organizations, according to the UN, Alabama is worse than a third world country. Mississippi can't provide clean water, and Texas can't keep the lights on. You'll never hear about that in American news. So in America, the rest of the world's backwards and we're all super good. You're never going to hear about the UN an organization full of international experts came to America and said, wow, you guys are worse off than some of these countries you criticize about how they can't take care of their people.
Alabama is worse than, that person said, Alabama is worse than a third world country. Mississippi can't provide clean water, and Texas can't keep the lights on. Yeah, I believe it. I've been watching the news. I'll never move to the South, that's for sure.
So why is it that in America they can't even acknowledge on American TV that the UN has come and said, you guys are not doing better than the rest of the third world? Like, we can't even talk about that in America. We won't even acknowledge that. Why is that?
I think it's because of big ego.
What do you mean?
Well, whoever is running the news, they just have a big ego about being an American in this country. And they don't want to, they want to glorify it. They don't want to talk about the bad. They're not talking about everything.
Could we call that willful ignorance?
Okay.
That's what my mom would call it when she'd, when I go, as a little boy and she wanted, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I go, I don't really want to know that. I want to do my own thing. And she's like, well, that's willful ignorance. You're like intentionally not trying to learn about something and say stupid, so you keep making mistakes. So
yeah,
I think it's a little bit bad look that I learned that lesson at age 5 to 7, and it appears America has yet to learn that lesson.
Oh, me too. My mother's taught me a lot about homelessness in America from a kid.
We only have you for a little bit longer. What else struck you about the interview? Let me do a quick review of what you said, just to jog your memory.
Sure.
Rosalind checked out the documentary on Cal Exit and was struck by the conversation, wanted to do an interview and express her support for the concept overall as a lifelong Californian, currently living outside of California, but coming back soon and always holding on to our values, which is what it's all about. A popular vote is ignored. That is not democracy. She also said her mail-in ballot was lost. That's a problem with democracy in America. Mm-hmm. She also said the fact that Trump was elected, but Hillary was the popular vote. Also, the two-party system, winner take all style American democracy is bad. She traveled the world and met a lot of people, like California. But most Americans don't look at the foreign world. They have no interest, whereas most Californians have traveled. It's safer in the foreign world than America, but you'll never hear about it. And American culture seems to be a little bit more violent and focused on the Second Amendment compared to other countries. Mm-hmm. Did we get anything wrong? And what other observations do you have?
Well, what's another observation?
You're on the spot. Go. Okay, sorry. Is that's
lots of pressure. Okay, so I could tell you another thing that triggered me to reach out to you guys.
Please.
When I was at the 3 last months of living in New York City. I mean, I'm not just bashing New York City. This is my life, and it's the whole country, basically. But I received the wrong mental health care because I am prescribed Zoloft for depression, right? In the pill bottle. I go to the pharmacy, I get my prescription, and then all of a sudden, the last pill bottle I took was not Zoloft. I know this because the doctor I reached out to said, yeah, that's not Zoloft. I was consuming that shit for about a month, and I noticed after a month, I noticed that pill was a different shape and a different color than the last pill. But it was labeled Zoloft. How would I know as a patient? I'm not the expert. Like, I'm supposed to trust the experts, and I'm a paying customer. That is also my life. And not only that, I reached out to a psychiatrist over there to help me with the state I was in because of these false pills. I get the wrong medication again because she said basically she was claiming I was bipolar. I never heard that in my life. And she kept saying, I'm bipolar, without even looking at my medical history, without even reaching out to my past doctors. Every good doctor I had did that, and she refused to do that. She would just assume. just because she caught me in a bad state or something. And you know, there's a million different mental health disorders. It could be anything. How does she know without properly investigating? And not only that, and she put me on bipolar meds. I noticed they weren't working. And not only that, one of the last sessions I had with her, she said, "Oh yeah, I don't really know if you're bipolar. I was just guessing because all my other patients are. So I prescribed you bipolar meds, and I have to wean off of it now. And I had to leave earlier than planned and break my lease because of this, and live with my mom because I need like 24/7, like someone to watch me 24/7, you know, someone trusting to wean off the pills properly. That's not right. That's just fucked up. That's my money and that's my life. Well, money ties into life now. So that's really what drove me to the breaking point to reach out to you guys too. And my dog has something.
Agrees. She agrees.
Yeah.
I was just looking up New York City mental health crisis, and I found this article, Spectrum News, New York 1, Losing Hope on the Streets. A mental health crisis grips the city. That came out on March 3rd, 2022.
It's one of the worst. Like, it's getting worse and worse and worse for mental health. I never had this type of care. I mean, this is just my experience, but I never had this bad of care in California and Utah. And then I moved there, and that shit's normal. And you know what? Also, on top of that, I was telling my friends about it. They're like, "Oh yeah, something kind of similar happened to me, and something kind of similar happened to me. Something kind of similar happened to me." I'm hearing this from multiple people, and it's just like sickeningly normal over there. That's unacceptable.
I agree. And that was one thing that always got me was when I started the California movement with the book, I would say, you know, California's different. We got our own progressive values. And people go, "Oh, you know, there's liberals in Chicago, liberals in New York." And I go, I've been in New York. Yes, they have progressive values, but they ain't us. And they don't do things like we do here.
It's not morally progressive.
There you go. And I was like, yeah, these are not the same type of progressives we have here. I think you just pointed that out with the mental health crisis. We wouldn't do that out here. I also was shocked to see AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York City. And people say she's so progressive, so progressive. My mom is Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
My dad is Anglo. But he spoke fluent Spanish. My mom didn't. So kind of a California story there. Oh. I'm 45 years old. AOC 2 weeks ago goes on TV and says, "I wasn't sure about an interracial marriage. I'm a Latina and I'm dating a white guy, and I'm not sure that that's, you know, America's ready for that." And I'm like,
we're already far past that issue, but
that was my reaction. And everybody goes, "Well, these New Yorkers, they're just like us." And I go, the hell they are, because we don't have that conversation in California. And we haven't since I was a boy 30 years ago. So nobody talks about, oh, somebody, you know, a Latin person's going to marry or date someone that's not Latin in California. Nobody has that conversation. Nobody cares. AOC goes, "I wasn't sure." I'm just pointing out. You pointed out one example. I wanted to give you another one. That these other liberals in other parts of America, they are not just like California, and they do not necessarily share our California values. Am I totally wrong on that, Rosalind?
No, not at all. I've noticed that from living there 2.5 years, and that's why I was like, I'm going to get the fuck out of here. Also, on top of that, renting is a bitch and a half there, because as soon as your lease goes up, most of the time they raise the rent 5 times the amount, like, or something like ridiculous like that. Also, most of the landlords are very corrupt. Let me tell you, so I lived in dorm rooms, and then I found an apartment in the East Village. My landlord there was known to be a registered sex offender. And he let rodents run around, which legally they're not supposed to do that if you pay in full. And when the lease was up, he raised it 5 times the amount, so I moved to Brooklyn. But this is normal there. It's normal. Well, maybe not the sex offender part, I don't know, but it's just normal.
Yeah, no, I don't believe we
Corruption.
have sex offenders running apartment complexes here. I could be wrong. I'm sure there's one or two who've gotten past the grid, but no, I don't think that's a normal thing.
Yeah. But anyways, I'm just saying in general, it's normal to the landlord for landlords to fuck over the tenants. Mainly in Manhattan, though. I noticed in Brooklyn it was better, but they were still. I'm sure if I stayed there and the lease went up, they would have raised it 5 times the amount, which is wrong, anyways.
Yeah,
Like it's crazy unaffordable amount when, like, obviously you can't get a job promotion to afford that much in that short span of time. You know what I mean? And I just got out of college too.
yeah. When I think one of the 5 times I went to New York City and stayed there for a week with my cousin, my prima, mi prima. One of her friends was staying in a apartment, and there was black mold lining the entire where this wall hit the ceiling, around the entire thing and around the floorboards, and the landlord just kind of like painted over it.
That's what
And
they
then,
do.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
the paint would chip off because the mold is still active, right? So it starts eating away the adhesive of the paint, and it chips off. And he goes, "Oh, that protects you." And we were all like from California, and we're going, "Paint doesn't protect you from mold."
No, it
And
doesn't.
so I
You
don't
know
know.
what? They did the same thing to me too in my apartment in Manhattan. There was a leak in my bathroom and they just painted over it, the maintenance. They just sprayed over it. There was
That's
some
a
mold.
health hazard. That's
Yeah,
you're
my mom was there. She was like throwing a she was like, I'm gonna sue them. And
yeah.
they finally, like, well, actually the one in Manhattan was really bad. There's That's the thing in Manhattan, they're run worse if they're not like super expensive places
So
because such a high demand.
yeah.
Um, but then in the other boroughs like Brooklyn or Queens or even the Bronx, it's run a little better most of the time.
So
I would
what
have
other
to say my maintenance was way better in Brooklyn for sure.
last couple minutes?
Mhm.
What are the key takeaways? If you okay, let's do this. Picture this for a second. The TV companies come to you. Rosalind, we're going to put you on California wide television for 2 minutes because we want everybody to hear your message, and we're going to make sure that it goes out to all the major network television stations in every major city in California, not outside of California, just major cities in California. The 8 p.m. broadcast, everybody's going to be watching, and you have 2 minutes and no more than 2 minutes to tell them why you think CalExit's important. What would you say if you had that much attention focused on you and that many eyeballs and no more than 2 minutes to explain it? You just got done with the podcast. What do you think is important to Californians? And if you only had 2 minutes to get a hold of them and everything was on the line, what would you choose to talk about?
Well, I know that we have the 15th worst violence against women in the world. We're basically a third world developing country with technology. We have the worst violence. We have the worst gun violence. We have the worst almost everything. Education. One of the worst racism, misogyny. And our government is out to attack us. So we need to get out and make our own Switzerland of the Pacific.
You have my heart forever. That was the original idea, was that California could become the new Switzerland for the next century.
You know, I heard that in the podcast, but I also was thinking about that before. Like, I mean, we're basically already doing that. We just need to leave to make it really happen.
Switzerland in the 1800s, when Europe conquered most of the planet, and being English was a big deal and being German was a big deal, and they didn't have many interracial marriages at that time.
Yeah.
Switzerland was this weirdo country in Europe that said, yeah, we got kind of Italians and Germans and French, and we all get along with each other.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, most of Europe was shooting at each other at this time. And here's this country where they had the people getting along and treating each other as brothers. That was
I have some Swiss Italian heritage.
Hey, nice. Yes. The what they found was it was bizarre that the Swiss Italians viewed themselves as more Swiss than Italian. The Swiss French viewed themselves as more Swiss than French. The Swiss Germans viewed themselves as more Swiss than German, and that offended the other European countries because they're like, well, we're German. Why are you hanging out with those French and Italians? And they go, well, we're Swiss German, and we kind of know them. They've been around. Yeah. I mean, I get it. They're not German, but they're Swiss German. They're Swiss Italian. They're Swiss French. We all kind of been doing our thing together for 1,000 years. Yeah, we fought, but now we're all together. And my sister married his cousin, et cetera. You guys need to relax. And that was such a bizarre concept for Europe. These Germans going, you're hanging out with Italians and French people like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And so they said we could become the international negotiation and dialogue place for Europe. And that's why the first UN, what we call the League of Nations, was in Switzerland. The very first attempt to have a world negotiation forum was not in Germany. It was not in France. It was not in America. It was not in England. It was in none of those super powerful empires. It was in little tiny Switzerland. Yeah. Because they actually lived diversity.
And they stay out of conflict. That's the key.
So if we're going to a future where it's not the 1800s, Europe doesn't own all the world.
Yeah.
Now Europe owns some of the world. America owns some of the world. China owns some. India owns some. Russia owns some. Latin America owns some. It would occur to me that we would need a new Switzerland that has all of these different peoples living together. And when I look around the world, the only place I can find is California. Does that seem like a fair conclusion to you?
Makes sense. We're the state with the highest income and the largest jobs, companies, everything. We have everything there. There's nothing stopping us. Biggest food supply.
And our diversity. I love I can go get Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, Arab, Middle Eastern, Thai, Cambodian, Oaxacan, Mexican, El Salvadoran cuisine by people from that country or whose parent came from that country and they learned the correct way to make it. And, I remember traveling to Denver about 10 years ago and I was like, let's go to sushi. And they go, you mean steak?
Yeah.
We have steak restaurants. I'm tired of steak. How about sushi? How about Mediterranean? You mean another steak restaurant?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that well that's not the case in New York City for sure. But I noticed that even Utah it's a little bit like it's not like that, but it's still like I lived here in St. George for my last 2 years of high school and my first 2 years of college. And it's like they have some options, but it's not the same. It's not authentic like California. New York City it is, but I don't want to live there anymore.
No slam in New York City on the food. The food is outstanding in New York City. I encourage everybody to at least visit. I loved it. And I encourage everybody, if you go to New York City, do yourself a treat. Go to the street vendors.
Yes, that's where you get the better food. It's cheaper, it's more authentic, and it's actually fresher. A lot of people think it's not clean when it's in the truck, but it is. If anything, it's more clean most of the time. Yeah. What was I gonna say? I would think that seafood is not as apparent in mid-America though, because you're not by the ocean.
Sure. Yeah.
Because you don't get as much fish besides the lake fish.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well,
also, you don't get fish imported as much because then it gets gross.
Well, unfortunately, I have got to get back to my Clark Kent role and stop being Superman for the day. Any last minute comments for the public?
Yeah, I am collaborating with our business partner Josh on the fashion line on the merch. So you guys will be seeing that. If anybody's interested in looking at my fashion work, you can take a look at my Instagram or my portfolio. I'm open to artist collaborations too. You can talk. Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you, Mark. Really
There's
appreciate
your
it.
link.
Thank you.
Roz Originals Portfolio. That's ROZ.
Mm-hmm.
Originalsportfolio.weebly.com. We also posted in the private chat for anybody else in the thing. There's the banners.
I also will be starting my own Etsy page with my designs for sale. So you guys can see that soon. It's coming up.
Also, there is her Instagram page, and that is Roslyn99. So look for ROZLYN 99.
Yes. I mainly do femme queer designs since I'm a femme and a queer. But sometimes I do men designs as well. That's what I specialize in. And puppy couture. I will be expanding my lingerie line, which did really well in New York City for the sample. And I'm working on self-teaching flower dyeing, which is a very sustainable way to dye your clothes with flowers and leaves. So I'm self-teaching about that. I'm planning on doing an art residency in Colorado the next summer, the summertime, because I don't want to be stuck there during the winter. And yeah, and I'll be planning on my master's in a couple years from now.
Oh,
Fashion.
wow. What are you going to pursue?
Fashion design.
Of course. Yeah.
I did fashion visual studies, and then before then I did general studies and associates. But this time I want it to specifically be design.
Quick question. Are hammer pants ever going to come back?
Hammer pants?
The MC Hammer was a musician in the 80s, and he had these giant parachute pants. That was very
parachute pants.
And they call them hammer pants. And I was wondering if your expert opinion, will hammer pants ever make a return? I owned a pair back in the day when MC Hammer was there. I thought they were great.
You know what? You're in luck because they're already coming back. I already see them slowly coming back.
Made my day.
I don't think they're as big now, but I see them coming back in trend, mainly for men and women. Also fashion.
It's hammer time.
That's funny.
The song is whoa, whoa, whoa. It's hammer time. Stop.
Also, we're trying to make the fashion industry more sustainable and more gender fluid.
That's awesome.
And I do puppy couture, so I'll be also working on a matching dog human line. So I make doggy clothes.
Matching dog human line.
Yeah, I already have some matching skirts with my dog and I'll be expanding that eventually.
Okay, if you need to, you want to dress up and get the attention of all your neighborhoods, coworkers, and friends, and you want to make sure that you match your dog, check out Roslyn. If you're also interested in puppy couture, fashion shows for small dogs, she's there too. And if you need gender fluidity in your clothing, also check out Roslyn. She's got you covered. That's Roz Originals portfolio.weebly.com, Roz Originals portfolio.weebly.com, or on Instagram at Roslyn99. Get that puppy couture, lingerie, gender fluid fashion. Christmas is coming around the corner. I'm sure it's great for everyone. So
I also take personal commissions, private commissions too.
Takes personal commissions, private commissions. I would want a pair of original 1980s style hammer pants. So if you want to look into that, I don't think it'll look good. I think it's embarrassing, but I would still wear it out of nostalgia. So it's might be a different assignment.
Let's talk. I could make that for you.
I'll send you some pictures, and you're going to say no. So that's I'll send you some links of MC Hammer.
Hey, maybe Josh and I could plan that for merch.
All right. Thank you all. It's a great interview. Hope you all saw it. Please check out the documentary, the podcast, and stay tuned. Rosalind's joining our little band of merry people. She's working on merch. We have Sunday meetings. You can see her there. Also check her out. You'll see more of her. Rosalind, bring on anybody that you know that ever wants to talk about CalExit, ever saw the podcast. We love meeting new people.
Okay. I have a couple of friends. Actually, one of them is in New York City, but I told her about it, and she really likes the idea.
Perfect. Is she from California?
No, she's from Washington, D.C. area, Virginia, but right in that area. But she really doesn't like
I want to talk to her.
When she's going, and she's a graphic designer. So she could help with our
look it up. Tell her, okay? I'll email you a link to this thing. Tell her we would love to talk to her. Love to do an interview.
Sure. Okay. That's awesome.
I'll see you soon, and I'm going to send you a link of this.
Have a good day.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.